You know, in those quiet moments late at night, when the noise of the world finally fades away, that's usually when the heavy questions start to surface. We're talking about the questions a lot of believers just bury deep down, simply because the answers feel, well, a little too terrifying to actually face. Today, we're diving into an explainer that unpacks a profound analysis of the 7 theological fears Christians are most afraid to ask. This exploration is going to pull back the curtain on our deepest spiritual anxieties and hopefully move us from a place of paralyzing doubt to some startling clarity. Picture this scenario for a second. A believer loses their temper, says something they absolutely shouldn't have, but before they even have a chance to pray and make it right, their life abruptly ends. So what happens? Does that single, unconfessed sin separate them from God forever? It is a terrifying thought. And it forces us to really ask ourselves if salvation is just this fragile little switch that flips off the very second we make a mistake. And the tension just escalates from there. What if you look back and realize you've wasted 20 years of your life? We're talking about choices that cost you your calling, your relationships, your precious time. And time is literally the one currency you can never, ever earn back. So if you squandered it, is your story permanently broken? Ultimately, all these haunting questions, whether it's unconfessed sin, completely wasted years, or even unanswered prayers, they all boil down to one unifying core anxiety. Have I gone too far from God? Because when we experience a massive failure or a heavy consequence, our psychology just naturally filters everything through a lens of deep shame. We immediately assume the absolute worst. Section 1. The weight of the past. Salvation, sin, and assurance. To counter this paralyzing fear of unconfessed sin, the source points us straight to Psalm 19. King David prays, "Cleanse me from secret faults." Now, think about the implication here for a second. If your salvation genuinely depended on perfectly confessing every single sin before you die, well, it would essentially depend on you having a flawless memory. You'd have to remember every careless word, every selfish motive. But our confidence isn't in the completeness of our own confession, it's in the sufficiency of Christ. And notice this absolutely critical distinction. There is a huge difference between a heart that is peacefully surrendering to sin versus a heart that is actively struggling against it. The major takeaway here is that good fruit doesn't purchase your salvation. It just reveals that there's life. The direction your heart is pointing matters so much more than achieving some impossible standard of absolute perfection. The real question is, are you defending your failures or are you returning to God when you inevitably fall? Section 2. The dark night, discipline versus condemnation. We have to recognize that there is a massive difference between the condemnation of a judge and the discipline of a father. Think about it. A judge condemns a criminal to cast them away, to punish them. But a father disciplines a child to correct them, to draw them closer. Forgiveness doesn't always magically erase natural consequences, but those hardships you're facing, they are not automatically proof that God has rejected you. Which naturally leads us to a deeply personal, honestly pretty painful question. What happens when heaven just feels totally silent? You pray for healing, you pray for your marriage, you pray for some kind of direction, and you hear absolutely nothing. Just crickets. The suspense of waiting is agonizing. And eventually, people stop asking, when will God answer? And they start asking, is God even there? Let's walk through this timeline from the biblical story of Daniel. Day 1, Daniel prays. For a whole week, absolute silence. 14 days in, still nothing. It isn't until day 21 that a messenger finally arrives. But notice this incredible detail the source highlights. The messenger reveals that the prayer was actually heard from the very first day. Daniel experienced 21 days of apparent deafening silence, while his prayer was actively being answered in a realm he couldn't even see. And that leaves us with this profound, rock-solid reassurance. Silence is not evidence of absence. I know delay feels completely identical to rejection when you can't see the unseen part of the story, but a silent heaven does not mean an empty throne. Section 3. The burden of shame, hiding from grace. Here's how the psychological trap works. First, temptation pulls you toward a failure. Then, shame immediately steps in, isolating you, telling you to hide from the exact God who can actually restore you. Contrast that isolation with the biblical invitation in Hebrews 4, which says to approach the throne of grace boldly. It's an incredible paradox, right? You don't clean yourself up so you can return to God. You return to God specifically because you need the cleansing. We see this dynamic play out perfectly in the story of the prodigal son. The guy demanded his inheritance and went out and wasted literally everything in a distant land. The whole shebang, just gone. But when he finally came to himself and headed back, expecting nothing but humiliation, what actually happened? His father saw him from a great distance, felt immediate compassion, and took off running toward him. The son's failure was devastating for sure, but it wasn't remotely stronger than the father's mercy.
Section 4. The Dawn of Restoration, Redeeming the Wasted Years.
Now we hit this epic, triumphant promise from the book of Joel. So I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten. Now obviously, God doesn't literally rewind the calendar. If you're 65 years old, you don't magically become 25 again. But here is the crucial point. Past devastation does not have the right to dictate your future. God steps in and redefines what those lost years actually mean. Just look at these concrete examples of history versus redemption. Joseph had years totally stolen by slavery and prison, yet his redeemed future was saving entire nations. Peter denied Christ 3 times, right when it mattered most, but was restored to preach at Pentecost. Paul literally hunted and persecuted early Christians, yet grace turned him into the church's greatest messenger. True redemption doesn't erase your history. It radically changes what your history is allowed to become. And this brings us to the ultimate psychological trap we all fall into. You are using yesterday to predict tomorrow. We absolutely have to stop projecting our past failures onto our future potential. Peter could have just stayed there, weeping bitterly in the dark. The prodigal son could have easily stayed living with the pigs. But they didn't. They got up. So, as we bring this explainer to a close, let's lock in these core truths. If you're terrified of unconfessed sin, remember that your hope relies on Christ, not your own perfect memory. If you are going through absolute hell right now, hardship does not automatically equal divine rejection. If you're waiting in the dark, heavenly silence is not absence. And if you are hiding away in shame, hear this. Grace is specifically, intentionally designed for the broken. Look, you can't rewind the tape. You cannot rewrite yesterday, and the consequences of the past are very real. But God is still God, even after your worst chapter. Your past might explain exactly where you've been, but it absolutely does not have to decide where your story ends.